So here's a little story that I can find in my personal life that I think it helps illustrate the concepts that I'm trying to get across when I think about affect and attitude, the way I think and the way I feel, and therefore I hope the way you think and the way you feel, and how one thing can affect the other. And I've actually had this experience more than once, but I can recall one day in particular. This is in the morning, and I arrived at my desk first thing, and there was the mail, and on top of the pile was one of these evaluation reports, or the feedback report that we all get after we do a talk or a presentation, and they're very useful because they help give a sense of how it went and how it impacted the audience. But there was one of them in particular I remember that gave me a much lower score. So interestingly, that's the one that got my attention. Scanned quickly over the good comments and went right down to this negative one, and I read it. And it said something like, oh, Dr. Kaufman went overtime. And he was right, it was a 20-minute talk, and I think I went to 25 minutes, something like that. But what really got me was he said, and he has no sense of humor. Well, that bothered me. It didn't even matter, actually, that the topic of the presentation was depression and suicide. Kind of hard to find much to be funny about in a topic like that. But even so, it really made an impact upon me that this particular doctor took the time to make that kind of comment. Anyway, I put it aside, went on with my daily work. But right from the beginning, you know, there was something that wasn't quite as okay about that day. I felt a little off, I felt a little less energy, I felt a little troubled, and I don't think that I could even put my finger on why that was so. Finished up the day, went home, sat down, and felt actually pretty lousy. It wasn't a high energy day, and I didn't feel good about the day, and I didn't feel so good about myself, and I felt really off. And I couldn't even at that point remember having started the day by reading those evaluations. So I sat down, reflected about the whole thing for a little while, then I remembered those evaluations, and then I had a chance in a quiet moment to think more about what the impact upon me was. Because here's what I think was going on. I read those evaluations, and I started to question myself somewhere inside. I started to think, maybe I'm not as good a speaker as I thought. And normally I think of myself as a pretty good public speaker, and I certainly have no qualms about public speaking. And then, you know, what happened was this barely conscious cascade of thoughts, one thing connecting to the next, all negative in nature, and it went something like this. Well, maybe I'm not such a good public speaker. Well, maybe I'm not really so good at this job of, you know, being the director of the physician health program as I thought. Maybe I'm not even that good a doctor. Maybe I should be giving the whole thing up. Maybe I'm not even that great a person. And little wonder when my thinking goes in that direction, that my feeling goes somewhere pretty unhappy right along with those very thoughts. Well, once I became aware of all of that, and once I could look at really the fallacy of that line of thinking, it's not rational to be concluding those things, one thing connected to the next. But at a certain level inside, that's just what happens, and I couldn't help it. Fortunately, I was able to sit down, rethink the whole thing, give myself more positive thoughts instead of those negative ones, feel some relief, and go on with my evening.